Stephen Hawking's hidden diary, buried for years, has now surfaced, and what it reveals about God will leave you speechless. The pages whisper of truths that challenge science, faith, and the very meaning of life itself. Could this genius, who unraveled the universe's greatest riddles, have held a personal belief that shakes everything we thought we knew? Let us open this extraordinary diary and uncover the words that caused Hawking was kicked out of the academic circles around the world. The lost journal that changed everything. The journal had been hidden away in the deepest corner of Cambridge University's archives, a place where the past rested undisturbed. But tonight, that peace was broken. The figure had waited for this moment for years, piecing together whispers and old records to locate the prize. And now, as they slipped into the fog, the weight of what they carried pressed heavily against their chest. The diary belonged to none other than Stephen Hawking, a man whose mind had shaped the way humanity saw the universe. But this wasn't just another collection of equations or theories. This was personal, and its contents, if revealed, could shake the foundations of science and belief alike. Before we delve into this, it's clear that what Stephen Hawking wrote goes far beyond anything we could have expected, and this won't be the only revelation that will leave you stunned. The next morning, the chatter in Cambridge was subdued, but a ripple of unease moved through academic circles. A rumor had begun, a strange, unexplainable buzz about something taken from the archives. People whispered in libraries and over coffee, their words filled with uncertainty. What could be so important that someone would risk everything to take it? Others dismissed it as nonsense. Cambridge had always been a place where legends and gossip walked hand in hand, but far from the hallowed halls of academia, the journal was already making its way into the hands of someone who would understand its value. The recipient was a journalist known for uncovering what others preferred to keep buried. Their name was not important. What mattered was their knack for piecing together fragments of truth. When the package arrived, they stared at it for a long moment, feeling the weight of what lay inside before carefully peeling away the brown paper. There it was, old and unassuming. The initials SWH were barely visible on the cracked leather. Opening the journal felt like trespassing into someone's mind. The handwriting was sharp, deliberate, with the occasional ink blot betraying moments of urgency. At first glance, it seemed like the ramblings of a brilliant but weary soul, but as the journalist read deeper, patterns began to emerge. Scattered among notes about black holes and quantum mechanics were words that didn't belong, words like consciousness and divine. Phrases like the fabric of reality and the mind of God appeared in stark contrast to the equations surrounding them. What was Hawking trying to say? The diary's existence was a contradiction. Hawking was famously skeptical of religion, often dismissing the notion of a creator with sharp wit and logic. Yet here were pages filled with musings that hinted at something more. The journalist's pulse quickened as they flipped through the pages, the entries becoming more cryptic the further they read. One passage stood out. To understand the universe is to understand ourselves. The question of God is not one of existence, but of necessity. The answers lie not in the stars, but in the connections we fail to see. It was clear this wasn't a scientific paper or a casual diary. This was a problem, one that seemed to bridge the divide between the physical and the metaphysical. The journalist's mind raced with possibilities. Was this an evolution of Hawking's thoughts, a hidden side of the man the world had never known? Or was it a deliberate attempt to provoke thought, to challenge humanity's understanding of reality? News of the diary's existence leaked quickly. It wasn't long before the internet was ablaze with speculation. Articles claimed it contained Hawking's final thoughts on the universe and its origins. Others argued it was a forgery, a cruel hoax meant to exploit his legacy. But those who had seen the snippets knew better. The handwriting, the language, the sheer depth of the ideas all pointed to authenticity. Still, the question remained, why had Hawking kept this hidden? What was he afraid of revealing? As the journalist delved deeper into the diary, they noticed something odd. The entries weren't in chronological order. It was as if Hawking had written them during moments of inspiration, returning to them as new ideas took shape. One page contained a detailed sketch of the Big Bang, annotated with equations, but in the margins, there was a simple, haunting line: energy cannot be created or destroyed, so where did it come from? Another page described the concept of time, yet it ended with the question: if time began, what existed before? And if it will end, what remains? These weren't just scientific questions. They were deeply existential. They hinted at a mind grappling with something far greater than the confines of physics. The more the journalist uncovered, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about Hawking's beliefs. It was about the very nature of human understanding. His diary challenged the boundaries between science and philosophy, suggesting that the two were not separate but intertwined. And at its core was a bold idea that the universe, with all its complexity, might not be random, that perhaps there was an underlying order, a purpose. The internet's frenzy grew with every leaked passage. Some hailed the diary as proof that science and faith could coexist. Others dismissed it as the musings of an aging mind, desperate to find meaning. But there was no denying its impact. The words felt alive, stirring something in those who read them. For many, it was as if Hawking was speaking directly to them, urging them to look beyond what they thought they knew. The later years of Stephen Hawking's life were marked by a paradoxical combination of decline and brilliance. His physical condition worsened, the once faint movements of his hands and fingers diminishing into near stillness. Yet his mind remained as sharp as ever, untethered by the confines of his failing body. Those who worked closely with him often spoke of his determination, his ability to focus so intensely on an idea that even the hum of his machines faded into the background. It was during these years, when the distractions of public appearances grew fewer, that many believe Hawking began to reflect more deeply on the larger, unanswerable questions. Hawking had always been a man of science. He lived in a universe defined by equations, particles, and cosmological constants. But in his solitude, there were whispers that he turned inward, grappling with questions that extended beyond the physical world. Some close to him noticed subtle changes in his demeanor, a longer pause before answering certain questions, an unusual spark in his eyes when discussing the unknown. Was it possible that the man who had spent his life decoding the origins of the universe had begun to wonder about its meaning? This diary, now in the hands of a curious journalist, seemed to be evidence of such a shift. The origins of the diary were shrouded in uncertainty. There were no records of it in the usual places, not among Hawking's published works, not in his lectures, not even in the private notes preserved by his closest colleagues. The first entry appeared to be dated sometime in the mid-1990s, a period when Hawking's health had taken a sharp turn. His speech, already slowed by his condition, had become entirely reliant on his voice synthesizer. Communication required immense effort, making his written words all the more significant. Each entry in the diary was deliberate, as though every thought had been carefully weighed before being committed to the page. One of the earliest entries read, "The universe is vast beyond comprehension, yet it operates with precision. The laws of physics are immutable, but are they the product of chance or something more?" This was not the voice of a scientist presenting a hypothesis. It was the voice of a man pondering the very fabric of existence. As the journalist continued reading, the entries grew bolder. Hawking wrote of the necessity of God, a phrase that seemed to contradict everything he had publicly stated, but the context revealed a more nuanced perspective. He wasn't advocating for a deity in the traditional sense. Instead, he was questioning whether the universe's intricate design implied a guiding principle, something beyond randomness. Hawking's later years were not just a time of physical decline, but of profound intellectual exploration. Confined to his wheelchair and relying on caretakers, he had more time than ever to think. The world around him continued to evolve. Advances in technology, breakthroughs in science, and a growing fascination with the intersection of physics and philosophy. Hawking had always been a pioneer, and now it seemed he was venturing into the ultimate frontier, the nature of existence itself. In one entry, he described a recurring dream. He wrote, "I am standing at the edge of the universe where time and space collapse into nothingness. There is silence, yet it is filled with meaning. In that void, I feel a presence, not of a person, but of understanding. It's as if the universe is aware of itself." The language was uncharacteristically poetic, almost spiritual. For a man who had dedicated his life to stripping away the mysticism of the cosmos, this was an astonishing departure. And yet, it wasn't entirely out of character. Hawking had always been drawn to the limits of knowledge, the edges of what could be explained. Perhaps it was inevitable that he would find himself staring into the void, wondering if it stared back. The diary suggested that Hawking's exploration of these ideas wasn't meant for public consumption. There were no grand conclusions, no definitive answers. Instead, there were questions, raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. He wrote of the arrogance of certainty, cautioning against the tendency to dismiss what we cannot yet understand. He spoke of the illusion of separateness, hinting at a belief that the universe and consciousness were somehow intertwined. But why keep these thoughts hidden? Hawking was no stranger to controversy. His books and lectures had often provoked debate, challenging both scientists and theologians. Perhaps he feared that these musings would undermine his credibility, that they would be seen as a betrayal of his scientific principles. Or perhaps he simply felt they were too personal, a glimpse into a part of himself he wasn't ready to share with the world. As the journalists pieced together the fragments of Hawking's life, they couldn't help but wonder, what drove him to write these entries? Was it the inevitability of his own mortality, the knowledge that his time was running out, or was it the culmination of a lifetime spent searching for answers, a realization that the universe's greatest truths might lie beyond the reach of science? One entry, written in the final years of his life, seemed to encapsulate this struggle. We search for meaning in the stars, yet we fail to see it in ourselves. Perhaps the greatest question is not the universe, but the mind that seeks to understand it. This wasn't the voice of a man defeated by his limitations. It was the voice of someone who had seen the universe in all its complexity and still found himself humbled by its grandeur. For all his achievements, Hawking seemed to acknowledge that some questions might never have answers, and maybe that was the point. As things settled in Cambridge, a new path started to take shape, leading to answers, but also more questions. A map to understanding the cosmos. The leather-bound diary lay open on the desk, its pages spilling thoughts that seemed to defy explanation. Each word, each carefully drawn line, held a sense of purpose that the journalist couldn't yet decipher. At first glance, it looked like a chaotic mix of dense mathematical equations, poetic musings, and cryptic phrases that seemed almost too deliberate to ignore. The deeper they delved, the more they realized that this wasn't just a collection of thoughts. It was a map, a code, or perhaps something far more profound, a question meant to reveal what one of the greatest scientific minds may have considered the ultimate truth. Decoding the diary was no simple task. The journalist, armed with a rudimentary understanding of the physicist's work, began cross-referencing the equations with known scientific theories. Some were familiar, references to the theory of relativity, quantum mechanics, and the event horizon of black holes, but others were maddeningly obscure, as if they existed just outside the boundaries of established science. In the margins, there were scribbled notes that seemed to verge on the philosophical. What is time but the shadow of eternity? And does the infinite contain the finite, or is it the other way around? One particular equation stood out, sprawling across an entire page with annotations in tiny, cramped writing. At its center was the phrase, divine geometry. The words seemed out of place, almost too evocative for the mind of a physicist who had spent his life dismissing the need for a divine creator. And yet, here it was, surrounded by calculations that hinted at a unifying theory, a bridge between the smallest particles and the vastness of the cosmos. What did this mean? Was it a metaphor, or was it alluding to something more tangible? The diary's poetic overtones added to its mystique. Known for his sharp wit and precise language, the physicist had allowed himself a rare vulnerability in these pages. He wrote of the fingerprint of God, describing it as the subtle symmetry woven into the universe. He referred to the eternal question, a phrase repeated in several entries but never fully explained. And then there was a grander scheme, a term that seemed to suggest an underlying order beneath the apparent chaos of existence. The journalist's excitement grew with each discovery, but so did their frustration. The writing was layered, almost intentionally elusive. Phrases seemed to loop back on themselves as if the diary was designed to challenge the reader's perception. Even the equations, normally tools of clarity in science, seemed to carry an air of uncertainty. There were symbols and notations that didn't align with any known mathematical system. At one point, the journalist noted a peculiar pattern. Certain pages contained dots and dashes in the margins, resembling Morse code. Could it be another layer of meaning, or was it simply the product of an overactive imagination? The more they studied the diary, the more it became clear that this was no ordinary document. It was almost as if the physicist had created a labyrinth of ideas, one that only someone intimately familiar with his thought process could navigate. He seemed to anticipate questions before they could be asked, leaving breadcrumbs in the form of cryptic hints. In one passage, he wrote, "The answers lie not in what we see, but in what we fail to recognize. Look beyond the obvious. The truth is hidden in plain sight." The journalist couldn't shake the feeling that this was a message directed at them, a challenge to see beyond the surface. But what was the writer pointing to? Theories began to form in their mind. Perhaps the diary was a way of reconciling scientific work with a deeper, more metaphysical understanding of the universe. Or perhaps it was a warning, a reminder that even the greatest minds are limited by the scope of human perception. One particularly strange entry described the concept of the cosmic veil. It read, "If the universe is a stage, the cosmic veil is its curtain. What lies behind it is not for the faint of heart, for it challenges all we hold dear. To lift the veil is to see the universe as it truly is, an infinite tapestry of cause and effect, where the observer is as much a part of the equation as the observed." The phrase, "the observer is as much a part of the equation as the observed," struck a chord. It echoed the principles of quantum mechanics, where the act of observation could alter the outcome of an experiment. But the words carried a weight that went beyond physics. They suggested a universe that was deeply interconnected, where consciousness played a pivotal role. Was this implying that the act of understanding the universe was itself a form of creation? As the journalist pieced together the fragments of thought, a picture began to emerge. This was a person who had spent their life searching for a theory of everything, a single framework that could explain the workings of the cosmos. And yet, in their final years, they seemed to have realized that such a theory might be incomplete without addressing the metaphysical, the questions of why and for what purpose. The diary wasn't just a scientific document, it was a philosophical manifesto, a testament to the limits of human knowledge and the boundless curiosity that drives us to explore the unknown. But the deeper the journalist ventured into the diary, the more questions arose. Certain passages seemed almost prophetic, as if the writer had glimpsed a future they couldn't fully articulate. In one entry, they described a universal convergence, a moment when the boundaries between science, philosophy, and spirituality would blur. They wrote, "There will come a time when our understanding of the universe will no longer be confined by the tools of science. we will see it for what it truly is, a reflection of ourselves, a mirror held up to the infinite. The language was haunting, almost otherworldly. It was as if the writer had reached the edge of human comprehension and found themselves staring into the abyss. But instead of retreating, they had documented their thoughts, leaving behind a roadmap for those brave enough to follow. The idea of the mirror appeared repeatedly throughout the diary. The writer seemed fascinated by the concept of reflection, not just in the literal sense, but as a metaphor for understanding. They wrote, "To see the universe is to see oneself. Every particle, every star, every equation is a fragment of the whole. To understand the whole, one must first understand the self." This wasn't the persona the world knew, someone who had once declared that God was unnecessary for the creation of the universe. This was someone who had grappled with the fundamental questions of existence and emerged with a perspective that defied easy categorization. The diary revealed a person unafraid to confront the unknown, even if it meant challenging their own beliefs. The pages of this diary revealed a vision of the universe so extraordinary, so radical, that it seemed to stretch the boundaries of scientific thought into the realms of the metaphysical. The carefully inked words painted a picture of a cosmos not as a vast, indifferent machine, but as something alive, something with intent. As the journalist pored over the entries, the notion of the universe possessing consciousness, an idea dismissed by many as mystical nonsense, emerged as a recurring theme. Stephen's words were deliberate, and his arguments, though unconventional, were grounded in the same intellectual rigor that had defined his career. He described the universe as a self-regulating entity, a system in which consciousness was not an anomaly, but a fundamental aspect. One entry read, "Consciousness is not an emergent property of matter. It is woven into the very fabric of reality. The observer shapes the observed, and the observed shapes the observer. Together, they form a single, inseparable whole." This perspective shifted the narrative of humanity's place in the cosmos. If Stephen was right, then the universe wasn't merely a backdrop for existence. It was an active participant, a vast intelligence that interacted with every particle, every wave, and every conscious mind within it. The implications were staggering. Could it be that the universe was aware of itself, experiencing itself through us? Stephen's thoughts on quantum mechanics took on a new dimension in the diary. He revisited the principle of superposition, the idea that particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed, but framed it in a way that suggested a deeper connection to consciousness. He wrote, "The act of observation collapses possibilities into reality. But what if the universe itself is the ultimate observer? What if every choice, every outcome is a reflection of a greater awareness?" These ideas flirted with quantum mysticism, a concept often dismissed by the scientific community as pseudoscience. Yet Stephen's exploration of these ideas was far from speculative. He connected them to the mathematics that governed the universe, drawing parallels between the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics and the seeming randomness of human thought. In his view, the chaotic interplay of particles mirrored the complexity of consciousness, suggesting that both were governed by the same underlying principles. Stephen's published works, particularly The Grand Design, had touched on some of these ideas, but the diary revealed a bolder, more unfiltered version of his thoughts. He had written in The Grand Design that the universe could create itself from nothing, relying on the laws of physics to bring it into existence. But in the diary, he seemed to take this idea a step further, questioning the very origins of those laws. One entry read, "The laws of physics are not constants. They are the product of the universe itself. If the universe can create its own laws, does it not imply intent? And if there is intent, what is its source?" The phrase intent appeared frequently throughout the diary, hinting at a profound shift in Stephen's perspective. While he stopped short of endorsing the idea of a traditional creator, His writings suggested that he saw the universe as more than a random collection of matter and energy. He referred to an underlying order, a grander scheme, and the fingerprint of something beyond comprehension. The concept of a grand design became a central theme. Stephen seemed to wrestle with the idea that the intricate balance of the universe, from the precise tuning of fundamental forces to the emergence of life, was too perfect to be a coincidence. He wrote, "The universe operates with an elegance that defies chance. Every equation, every constant is a thread in a vast tapestry. To dismiss the possibility of design is to ignore the harmony that binds it all together." This harmony, he argued, could be interpreted as evidence of an intelligent design. But Stephen, ever the skeptic, was careful to frame this not as proof, but as a possibility worth considering. He questioned whether humanity's limited understanding of the universe's complexities had led to premature conclusions. Perhaps the idea of a creator was not a relic of ancient superstition, but a concept that could coexist with scientific inquiry. Stephen's diary also hinted at a profound respect for the interconnectedness of all things. He described the universe as a cosmic web where every action, no matter how small, rippled across time and space. One particularly evocative passage read, "The universe is not a collection of separate entities. It is a single, unified whole. To understand it, we must see beyond the illusion of separateness and embrace the interconnectedness of all things." This idea resonated with certain philosophical and spiritual traditions, though Stephen's approach was distinctly his own. He wasn't proposing a spiritual worldview, but rather a framework in which science and spirituality were two sides of the same coin. His thoughts bridged the gap between empirical evidence and existential wonder, suggesting that the two were not mutually exclusive. The diary's revelations challenged the journalist's own preconceptions about Stephen's legacy. Here was a man who had spent his life championing the power of reason, yet his final writings seemed to embrace the unknown with a sense of awe. The universe, as Stephen described it, was a place of infinite possibilities, where the lines between science and philosophy blurred. It was a place where questions mattered more than answers, and where the search for meaning was as important as the search for truth. Stephen's ideas about a universal consciousness raised profound questions about humanity's role in the cosmos. If the universe was aware of itself, then what did that mean for us? Were we mere spectators, or were we participants in a grand design? His writings suggested the latter. He described humanity as the universe made conscious, a way for the cosmos to understand itself. This perspective imbued existence with a sense of purpose, one that was both humbling and empowering. As the journalists reached the final pages of the diary, they were struck by a passage that seemed to encapsulate Stephen's path. The universe is not a machine to be dissected. It is a song to be heard, a story to be told. We are its storytellers, its listeners, and its creators. In understanding it, we understand ourselves. These words, poetic and profound, left an indelible mark. They suggested that Stephen, for all his skepticism and scientific rigor, had come to see the universe as something far greater than a sum of its parts. It was a question to be explored, a masterpiece to be appreciated, and perhaps in some way, a reflection of the divine. Each discovery turned the words in the diary into more than thoughts. They became the start of something bigger. A physicist's words about a higher power. The section that would later be referred to as the God entry stood apart from the rest of Stephen's diary, not because of its equations or scientific musings, but because of its raw, unfiltered humanity. It was here that the man who had famously dismissed the need for a creator allowed himself to wrestle openly with the idea of a higher intelligence. The words carried a weight that was almost unbearable, as if Stephen had poured his very soul into these pages. For all his sharp wit and unyielding logic, this entry revealed a side of him that few had ever seen, vulnerable, uncertain, and deeply introspective. One passage in particular stunned the journalist. Stephen wrote, "If the universe can create itself, does that imply agency? Is the act of creation itself evidence of a creator, or merely the outcome of natural law? I have spent my life searching for answers, only to find that the questions themselves are infinite." These words were not a declaration of faith, nor were they a denial. They existed in a space between belief and disbelief, a gray area where the boundaries of science and philosophy blurred. For a man who had publicly aligned himself with atheism, this contemplation was nothing short of revolutionary. It wasn't an admission, but it wasn't a dismissal either. It was a question, one that seemed to haunt him as much as it inspired him. The God entry also revealed a tension that ran through much of Stephen's later writings. On one hand, he remained deeply committed to the scientific method, to the idea that the universe could be understood through logic and reason. On the other, he seemed to acknowledge that there were limits to what science could explain. He wrote, "There is a simplicity to the laws of physics that borders on the divine, yet simplicity is not the same as understanding. The elegance of the universe may be its greatest illusion, a veil that hides its true nature from us." The phrase, "a veil that hides its true nature," echoed his earlier musings about the cosmic veil. But here the tone was different. It wasn't just about the mechanics of the universe, it was about the meaning behind it. Stephen seemed to be grappling with the idea that there might be an intelligence, not necessarily a deity in the traditional sense, but something that imbued the cosmos with purpose. For the journalist, these revelations raised as many questions as they answered. What had driven Stephen to explore these ideas so deeply? Was it the inevitability of his own mortality, the knowledge that his time was running out, or was it the culmination of a lifetime spent probing the universe's greatest questions? The diary didn't provide clear answers, but it offered glimpses into the mind of a man who refused to shy away from the unknown. In one particularly poignant passage, Stephen wrote, "I do not believe in the God of religion, but I cannot dismiss the possibility of a higher intelligence. To do so would be to ignore the complexity, the beauty, the sheer improbability of existence. Perhaps God is not an entity, but a principle, a unifying force that binds us all." These words were both startling and profound. They didn't contradict his public statements so much as they expanded upon them, adding layers of nuance that had been absent in his more straightforward declarations. It was as if Stephen was inviting readers to think beyond the binary of belief and disbelief, to consider the possibility that the truth might lie somewhere in between. The emotional undertones of the God entry were impossible to ignore. Stephen's struggles, both physical and existential, seeped into the writing. He spoke of the loneliness of scientific inquiry, the burden of carrying questions that might never be answered. Yet there was also hope, a sense that the search for meaning was itself a kind of meaning. He wrote, "We are the universe made conscious, a way for the cosmos to understand itself. In that understanding, there is a kind of divinity, a reflection of something greater than ourselves. Perhaps that is enough." This idea that humanity's ability to comprehend the universe was itself a form of divinity was a recurring theme in Stephen's diary. It was a perspective that didn't require faith in a traditional sense, but still acknowledged the profound interconnectedness of all things. For Stephen, it seemed, the universe was not a cold, indifferent machine, but a place of wonder, where even the smallest particle could hold a hint of the divine. The God entry ended with a line that left the journalist speechless. "If there is a creator, then the greatest act of faith is to seek them. And if there is not, the search remains no less meaningful." These words were a fitting conclusion to a section that defied easy interpretation. They encapsulated the essence of Stephen's path, a relentless pursuit of knowledge, driven by a curiosity that refused to be constrained by dogma or doubt. It was a reminder that for all his scientific achievements, Hawking's greatest legacy might be his willingness to ask the questions that others were too afraid to confront. The journalists had barely begun to grasp the full scope of Hawking's diary when their quiet world was upended. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of an anonymous email. It arrived late at night, its subject line ominous. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." The message was brief and chilling. "Return it to its rightful place, or there will be consequences." There was no name, no signature, only an untraceable email address and the weight of an unspoken threat. Initially, the journalists dismissed it as a prank, a response to the growing buzz around the diary's leaked excerpts. But when they noticed a dark sedan idling outside their apartment for the third consecutive day, unease began to set in. It wasn't paranoia, there was a pattern. The same sedan appeared outside their office, at the coffee shop they frequented, even on a quiet street where they often walked to clear their head. The occupants of the car never made contact, but their presence was enough to send a clear message. Someone was watching. As the story of the diary gained traction, so did the risks. The journalist's inbox overflowed with emails ranging from genuine curiosity to outright hostility. Some hailed the diary as the most important discovery of the century, a bridge between science and spirituality. Others called it blasphemy, an affront to Hawking's legacy. But the most unnerving messages were the ones that demanded silence. "Stop publishing these lies. You're playing with forces you don't understand. This will end badly for you." The journalists began to suspect that powerful entities had a vested interest in keeping the diary out of public view. The nature of Hawking's revelations, his musings on God, consciousness, and the origins of the universe, challenged fundamental assumptions held by institutions that thrived on certainty. Governments, religious organizations, and even elements within the scientific community all had reasons to suppress such a disruptive narrative. One night, as the journalists reviewed their notes, a sudden noise shattered the silence. The sound of glass breaking. Heart pounding, they rushed to the living room to find the window shattered and a brick lying amidst the shards. Attached to it was a note scrawled in hurried, almost illegible handwriting. "You've been warned." Fear began to seep into every corner of the journalist's life. They started taking precautions, changing their routines, using encrypted communication, and avoiding public appearances. But the pressure only intensified. Their phone calls were intercepted with strange clicks and echoes. Packages meant for them arrived opened or tampered with. It became clear that whoever was behind these efforts was not just trying to intimidate them, they were trying to erase the diary's existence. The public, however, was not so easily silenced. Leaked passages from the diary continued to circulate online, sparking heated debates and wild conspiracy theories. Some claimed that the diary proved the existence of a grand design, evidence that humanity was not alone in the universe. Others argued that it was part of a disinformation campaign, a fabricated document meant to manipulate public opinion. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. The more the journalists dug into the diary's history, the more they realized how tightly it had been guarded. The diary wasn't mentioned in any of Hawking's official records. Even his closest colleagues seemed unaware of its existence. But whispers began to emerge from unexpected sources. Former assistants, archivists, and academics who hinted at Hawking's fascination with unorthodox ideas in his final years. One source, speaking on condition of anonymity, claimed that Hawking had been in contact with individuals outside the scientific community, people with backgrounds in philosophy and metaphysics. If true, this suggested a deliberate effort to explore perspectives that went beyond the boundaries of traditional science. As the journalists pieced together these fragments, they began to uncover a pattern of suppression. Requests for interviews with key figures were met with silence or outright refusals. Public records related to Hawking's later years contained glaring gaps, as if entire chapters of his life had been scrubbed from history. It was as if someone or some group had anticipated the disruptive potential of his ideas and taken steps to bury them. Then came the breaking point. The journalist woke one night to find their apartment ransacked, bookshelves overturned, papers scattered, and their laptop missing. The only item left untouched was the diary itself, hidden in a safe beneath the floorboards. It was clear that whoever had done this knew exactly what they were looking for, and when they didn't find it, they left a final message, scrawled on the wall in permanent marker. This is your last warning. The incident forced the journalist into hiding. They moved between safe houses, relying on a network of trusted friends and colleagues to keep the diary secure. But even as the danger grew, so did their determination. The diary was too important to be silenced. It wasn't just a collection of thoughts. It was a challenge to the way humanity understood itself and the universe. The world outside continued to debate the diary's significance. Experts in physics, theology, and philosophy weighed in, each offering their own interpretation of Hawking's words. Some saw the diary as a bridge between science and spirituality, a rare glimpse into the mind of a man unafraid to question everything. Others dismissed it as a distraction, a relic of a genius grappling with his mortality. But one thing was certain: the diary had ignited a conversation that could not be ignored. As the journalist worked to preserve and share the diary's contents, they began to uncover connections that hinted at a larger conspiracy. Financial records linked shadowy organizations to efforts to suppress controversial ideas. Leaked emails revealed discussions about managing public perception of scientific discoveries. And in the background, always were the watchers, the dark sedans, the anonymous threats, the relentless pressure to stay silent. The stakes had never been higher. The diary was no longer just a document, it was a battleground. On one side were those who sought to protect his truths, to honor Hawking's legacy by sharing his unfiltered thoughts with the world. On the other were the forces of suppression, driven by fear, power, or the desire to maintain the status quo. The world was only starting to see what the diary meant, but its impact was already spreading everywhere. When the diary went public, the day the contents of Stephen Hawking's diary were fully leaked to the public, the world changed in ways no one could have predicted. News outlets raced to cover the story, their headlines screaming of a revelation that defied categorization. Hawking's final words on God and the universe shake the world. Social media erupted in a frenzy, with hashtags like Hawking Diary and Universe Redefined trending across platforms. In an instant, the diary's contents transcended academic circles and became a global phenomenon, igniting debates that touched every corner of society. Television studios scrambled to assemble panels of experts to dissect the revelations. Physicists, theologians, philosophers, and cultural commentators found themselves seated side by side, struggling to find common ground. The diary's musings on a higher intelligence and a grand design sparked heated arguments. Some saw it as a long overdue acknowledgement of divine influence in the universe, while others dismissed it as the ramblings of a man grappling with his mortality. One particularly contentious excerpt dominated the airwaves. The universe's laws are not static. They are the product of an evolving system. This evolution suggests intent, not randomness. Perhaps this intent is what some would call God. For religious communities, this was both a validation and a challenge. Leaders of various faiths seized upon the diary as proof that even the most brilliant scientific mind had come to acknowledge the divine. Churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues saw surges in attendance as believers sought solace in what they saw as newfound affirmation of their faith. Sermons echoed with phrases like Hawking's epiphany and the reconciliation of science and spirituality, but not everyone was convinced. Prominent atheists and secular thinkers pushed back, arguing that the diary's language was being misinterpreted. They pointed out that Hawking had often spoken metaphorically and that his words should not be taken as an endorsement of religion. Debates grew increasingly polarized, with both sides accusing the other of twisting the truth to suit their agendas. Amidst the ideological clash, the scientific community found itself in turmoil. For decades, Hawking had been a symbol of rational thought, a beacon of clarity in the often murky world of theoretical physics. Now, his final writings seemed to blur the lines between science and philosophy, leaving his peers divided. Some celebrated the diary as a groundbreaking exploration of the universe's questions, while others saw it as a dangerous departure from scientific rigor. The diary's impact wasn't limited to intellectual debates. Its revelations sparked a wave of philosophical and political upheaval. Protests erupted in major cities as people demanded answers from institutions they felt had withheld the truth. In Washington, D.C., demonstrators gathered outside the Capitol holding signs that read, "The universe has a purpose, and science and faith are one." Meanwhile, counter-protesters waved banners declaring Hawking wouldn't want this and keep science secular. Governments around the world were forced to respond. In some countries, leaders embraced the diary's revelations, using them to bolster national narratives about destiny and divine favor. In others, authorities moved to suppress discussions, fearing the potential for unrest. State-controlled media in certain regions labeled the diary a hoax, while independent outlets risked censorship to cover its implications. Social media became a battleground of its own. Memes, think pieces, and viral videos flooded feeds, each offering a different take on Hawking's words. Influencers and celebrities jumped into the fray, amplifying the chaos. Conspiracy theories flourished, with some claiming that the diary was a fabrication designed to control the masses, while others suggested it was a long-hidden secret finally brought to light by brave whistleblowers. The diary's influence reached into classrooms and boardrooms alike. Universities revised their curricula to include discussions on the intersection of science and spirituality. Corporate leaders cited Hawking's writings in speeches about innovation and purpose. Even the stock market felt the ripple effects, with companies specializing in technology and space exploration experiencing sudden surges in investment. For ordinary people, the diary's revelations were deeply personal. Families found themselves divided as they debated its meaning around dinner tables. Some individuals reported profound spiritual awakenings, while others experienced existential crises. Support groups formed online and in person to help people process the diary's implications. The question on everyone's lips was the same: what does this mean for us? The religious divide was stark, but it wasn't the only fracture. Philosophical and cultural rifts widened as people grappled with what the diary suggested about humanity's place in the cosmos. Was the universe truly imbued with meaning, or was Hawking merely speculating? Could science and faith coexist, or were they destined to remain at odds? These questions, once confined to academic debates, now dominated headlines and conversations worldwide. Amidst the chaos, whispers of conspiracy grew louder. Some alleged that powerful organizations were manipulating the narrative for their own gain. Others claimed that the diary was incomplete, that key sections had been deliberately withheld to obscure the full truth. A few even suggested that the diary itself was part of a larger plan, a carefully timed revelation designed to shift public consciousness. As the world struggled to make sense of the diary's impact, the journalist who had leaked it remained in hiding. Their anonymity only added to the intrigue, with speculation about their motives fueling endless debate. Were they a hero, exposing truths that had been hidden for too long, or were they a reckless agitator, unleashing chaos for personal gain? Meanwhile, the diary continued to inspire acts of both creation and destruction. Artists found new muses in Hawking's words, producing works that celebrated the beauty and complexity of the universe. At the same time, extremists seized upon the diary to justify their own agendas, twisting its messages to suit their narratives. In one particularly chilling incident, a fringe group attempted to sabotage a scientific research facility, claiming that its work was an affront to the grand design described in the diary. Despite the turmoil, the diary's core message persisted. The universe was more than a collection of particles and forces. It was a place of wonder, complexity, and possibility. Hawking's words, though open to interpretation, had sparked a global conversation about meaning and existence. They had reminded humanity of its capacity for curiosity, for questioning, and for imagining a reality beyond what was immediately visible. The battered leather journal sat open on the desk, its pages filled with ink-stained whispers of a mind that had transcended the limits of conventional thought. The journalist, now joined by a group of trusted experts, worked tirelessly to uncover the diary's deepest questions. Astrophysicists, mathematicians, linguists, and even a cryptographer had been enlisted, their collective expertise aimed at decoding passages that had defied all previous attempts at understanding. This was the final push, the moment when the world's most strange document might finally give up its truths. One of the experts, a mathematician renowned for their work in chaos theory, pointed to a set of seemingly random numbers scrawled in the margins of several entries. "These aren't just numbers," they said. "They're coordinates, but not in the traditional sense. They could correspond to quantum states or even dimensions beyond our perception." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If the coordinates were real, they suggested that Hawking had been exploring the very fabric of existence on a level that defied current understanding. The cryptographer, meanwhile, had uncovered a recurring pattern in the diary's language. Certain words and phrases appeared in clusters, their meanings shifting subtly depending on context. Words like origin, consciousness, and infinity seemed to hold dual meanings, pointing both to physical phenomena and to metaphysical concepts. It was as if Hawking had encoded layers of meaning into his writing, leaving a trail for those willing to look beyond the surface. The breakthrough came when the team combined these insights, mapping the coordinates against Hawking's equations and the linguistic patterns. The result was astonishing, a conceptual framework that linked the fundamental forces of the universe with the nature of consciousness. The diary seemed to suggest that the universe was not a collection of isolated phenomena, but a unified whole, a living, breathing entity that was both observer and observed. At the heart of this framework was a single, breathtaking idea. The universe had intent, not in the anthropomorphic sense of a deity sitting in judgment, but as a self-aware system that sought to understand itself. Hawking described this in one particularly cryptic passage. "The universe is the question and the answer. It is the creator and the created. To understand it, we must see ourselves not as separate from it, but as integral to its being." This revelation was both thrilling and unsettling. It challenged the foundations of both science and religion, suggesting that humanity's search for meaning was not an external quest, but an internal realization. The universe, Hawking seemed to argue, was a mirror, reflecting back the consciousness of those who sought to understand it. The team worked through the night, each discovery leading to another. They uncovered a passage that appeared to address the nature of time, one of Hawking's lifelong obsessions. He wrote, "Time is not a line but a tapestry, woven from threads of possibility. Each moment contains all others, a convergence of past, present, and future." This reimagining of time aligned with certain interpretations of quantum mechanics, where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. But Hawking took it further, suggesting that time itself was a construct of consciousness, a way for the universe to organize its infinite potential. The diary's final pages were the most cryptic of all. They contained a series of symbols that defied immediate interpretation, accompanied by a single haunting phrase: "The ultimate truth lies not in the stars, but within." The team debated the meaning of this for hours. Was it a philosophical statement, a call to introspection, or was it a literal clue pointing to some hidden aspect of human consciousness? The cryptographer suggested that the symbols might represent a form of ancient language, a universal syntax that predated human civilization. Using advanced software and historical references, they began to decode the symbols, revealing a message that was both simple and profound. We are the universe's way of understanding itself. As the full meaning of the diary came into focus, the team realized they were witnessing something transformative. Hawking's final message was not a declaration of faith or a repudiation of science, but a synthesis of the two. He had envisioned a universe where the boundaries between the physical and the metaphysical dissolved, where understanding the cosmos was inseparable from understanding oneself. The implications were staggering. If Hawking's theories were correct, then humanity's role in the universe was far greater than anyone had imagined. We were not mere spectators, but active participants in a cosmic dance, co-creators of reality itself. This perspective offered a new way of thinking, one that transcended the divisions of faith and science, offering a vision of unity in a fragmented world. But with this revelation came questions. How would the world respond to such a paradigm shift? Would it embrace the idea of a conscious universe, or would it retreat into the safety of old certainties? The team knew that the diary's contents would spark debates for generations to come, reshaping the way humanity understood its place in the cosmos. As the team prepared to share their findings with the world, the journalists reflected on the path that had brought them here. The threats, the sleepless nights, the relentless pursuit of truth. It had all led to this moment. Hawking's diary was more than a document. It was a beacon, a reminder that the search for meaning was as infinite as the universe itself. When people begin to see their place in the universe differently, what follows can change everything. How the diary changed humanity. In the aftermath of the diary's revelation, the world found itself grappling with a new reality. Stephen Hawking's ideas, his synthesis of science, consciousness, and the possibility of a universal intent, reshaped the way humanity thought about its place in the cosmos. Movements sprang up across the globe, inspired by the diary's central message that the universe was a reflection of its observers and that understanding it was inseparable from understanding ourselves. Philosophers coined new terms to describe this paradigm shift, calling it the Hawking convergence. Universities began offering courses on cosmological introspection, blending physics, philosophy, and mindfulness. In some ways, it felt like a renaissance, an era where the rigid boundaries between disciplines dissolved in favor of holistic exploration. Communities formed around the idea of universal unity, emphasizing cooperation over division and curiosity over dogma. Even the most skeptical corners of academia couldn't deny the diary's influence, though debates raged on about its true meaning. Religious leaders, too, found themselves reinterpreting their teachings in light of Hawking's words. Some embraced the diary as a bridge between faith and science, arguing that its message of interconnectedness aligned with long-held spiritual beliefs. Others resisted, viewing it as a challenge to the authority of traditional doctrine. These divisions sparked fierce discussions, but they also brought new voices into the conversation. For the first time, scientists and theologians were meeting on common ground, united by the shared quest to understand the ultimate nature of existence. Politically, the impact of the diary was no less profound. Governments scrambled to address the societal shifts sparked by its revelations. Policies encouraging scientific research and philosophical education gained traction, while initiatives promoting dialogue between differing belief systems flourished. In some nations, leaders cited Hawking's ideas as a call to action, urging humanity to focus on cooperation and the preservation of the planet. Others, however, viewed the diary with suspicion, fearing its potential to disrupt established power structures. At the heart of this global transformation was a lingering question. Why had Hawking kept these ideas private? Why had he, a man so open with his scientific theories, chosen to confine his most profound reflections to the pages of a hidden journal? Speculation abounded. Some suggested he feared the backlash from both religious and scientific communities, while others believed he was protecting his legacy, waiting for the right moment to share these thoughts. A few even theorized that Hawking had left the diary as a challenge, a question meant to be uncovered by future generations. The journalist who had brought the diary to light often pondered this question. They had spent countless hours poring over Hawking's words, trying to piece together his motivations. One passage in particular stood out. To question is to risk. To answer is to invite judgment. Perhaps the greatest act of courage is to embrace the unknown, not as a threat, but as a companion. These words seem to encapsulate Hawking's philosophy, his willingness to explore ideas that defied easy explanation. They also hinted at the vulnerability that underpinned his genius, a recognition that even the greatest minds could not claim to have all the answers. In many ways, the diary was as much a reflection of Hawking's humanity as it was of his intellect. As the years passed, the diary's influence only grew. Artists, writers, and musicians found inspiration in its pages, producing works that celebrated the beauty and complexity of the universe. Popular culture embraced Hawking's ideas, with films, documentaries, and novels exploring the themes of interconnectedness and cosmic intent. The phrase, "We are the universe's way of understanding itself," became a mantra, a reminder of the profound responsibility that came with being conscious beings in an infinite cosmos. But alongside this celebration came challenges. Not everyone was willing to accept the implications of Hawking's message. Detractors argued that the diary was being misinterpreted, that its ideas were being co-opted for agendas that Hawking himself might not have supported. Others feared that the emphasis on unity and introspection would lead to complacency, a retreat from the hard realities of scientific and social progress. Despite these tensions, one thing remained clear. The diary had sparked a dialogue that transcended boundaries. It had reminded humanity of its capacity for wonder, for curiosity, and for seeking answers to the questions that defined existence. Hawking's final words, though open to interpretation, carried a sense of hope, a belief in humanity's potential to rise above its limitations and reach for something greater. The journalists, now far removed from the chaos of the initial leak, often reflected on the path that had brought them to this point. They remembered the fear and uncertainty, the moments of doubt, and the overwhelming responsibility of sharing the diary with the world. But they also remembered the awe, the sense of standing at the edge of something extraordinary. In their quiet moments, they would return to one particular passage, a line that seemed to resonate more deeply with each passing year. The universe is not a riddle to be solved, but a story to be told. In telling it, we become part of its endless unfolding. As the journalists looked out at the world, a world changed by Hawking's words, they felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The diary's message had not answered all the questions, but it had reminded humanity of the importance of asking them. It had shown that science and faith, reason and wonder could coexist, each enriching the other in the search for truth. And so, as the legacy of Stephen Hawking's diary continued to unfold, it became clear that his greatest gift was not the answers it provided, but the questions it inspired, questions that would echo through the ages, carrying humanity forward on its endless path of discovery. Is Stephen Hawking's leaked diary a profound revelation about God, or is it just another story designed to spark debate? Tell us your thoughts, and remember to like and subscribe for more.